Chapter 8, A Tough Choice. In a few minutes, Scott and Rico had reached the mine entrance. They crawled into the dark night outside, then tried to catch their breath. The mine had collapsed behind them as they ran. A cloud of dust and coal gas had covered them. Now both boys were black from soot. They were coughing, tired and beaten, but they were alive. "Made it," Rico said. Then he broke into coughs. "Yeah, just," Scott agreed. But for a while he was looking like bad. "Yeah, we're okay," Rico said, "but what about Clay?" "Ask me if I care," Rico snapped back. "That guy tried to kill me." "Yeah, but he's still in there," Scott replied, "and we'd be in there too if it wasn't for his flashlight." The two boys looked at each other. A cloud of dust was coming out of the mine entrance, but there was no sign of Clay. They had to decide, go home or go back in. The decision did not take long. "Okay, so I'm an idiot," Rico said. "Me too," Scott added. With that, Rico grabbed the flashlight and led the way back into the mine. "Clay!" Scott shouted. Then the dust got in his throat and he began to cough. "Clay! This way!" Rico called. But there was no answer. With all the dust, they could hardly see at all. The flashlight beam showed dust, but only a short distance. Beyond that, there was nothing. "Clay?" Silence. The boys kept moving into the mine. The dust made it hard to breathe. Scott began to cough like crazy. He put his sleeve up in front of his mouth and nose like an air filter. Rico did the same. "Clay!" In the distance there was a sound like a voice. It was hard to hear, as if the voice were buried deep inside the mine. "Clay, is that you?" Rico yelled. Again, a sound. As the boys moved on, the sound became louder. It was like screaming or crying. "Clay, we're coming!" Scott yelled. Now they could hear words. "Help! I need help!" In a few minutes they knew why. In front of them was a wall of rock and loose stone. It blocked the path of the tunnel. "Clay, are you in there?" Rico yelled. "Yeah," came the reply. "I can see your light." The two boys looked at each other. If Clay could see their light, there had to be an opening in the rock wall. But they couldn't see any hole in the rocks. There was too much dust and smoke. "We'll go to the farmhouse and call for help," Scott yelled. "No, don't leave me here," Clay begged. "I brought the treasure box this far. I'll share it with you." Rico shook his head. No wonder Clay was stuck in the mine. He dragged the money while Scott and Rico were running. It must have slowed him down a lot. Scott figured it was not the time to talk about sharing treasure. The problem was getting out alive. Most of the mine had caved in. There was no telling how long this tunnel would stay clear. Rico began moving the light over the wall of the rock. "Tell me when it seems really bright," he shouted. From his side of the wall, Clay stared at a pile of dark stones. On the other side were Scott and Rico and Freedom. On his side was a box with $250,000. "Okay, the light is shining right in," Clay told them. "I'll stick my arm through the hole." From the outside, Scott and Rico stared at the other side of the same wall. Suddenly they saw a muddy hand wiggling between two stones. The opening was small. It was barely big enough for Clay's arm. "Okay, we see you," Rico called out. "Get your arm out and we'll pull away some rocks." Both boys got on their knees in front of the rock wall. Rico pulled out a big rock near the opening, but it wouldn't move. Scott pulled away some smaller stones beneath the opening. Soon he had made the hole twice as large as it was, but there was still no way that Clay could fit through it. "See the big rock?" Rico said. "If we both pull—" Scott began to cough again. Then he stopped. They both grabbed at the large rock and tried to move it. On the count of 3, Rico said. 1, 2, pull! Pulling with all their strength, they slid the rock halfway out, then turned it sideways. The hole is big enough, Scott declared. If we pull it all the way, the whole wall could collapse. Come on, Clay, you can squeeze through that, Rico said. Yeah, but the box won't go through, Clay called back. Leave the box, Scott cried. Then he began coughing again. Clay, you can stay in there with the money and wait for help, or you can squeeze through, Rico told him. We've already risked our necks to come back in here. We're not going to get killed so you can get rich. Now make up your mind. In 20 seconds, we're out of here. Rico was like that. Once he made up his mind, there was no fooling around. 5 seconds left, Rico shouted. When the time was up, there was nothing more to say. Okay, Scott, let's go, Rico said. Clay, we'll call for help when we get out to the top. Clay was scared stiff. He was trapped in a collapsed mine. It was dark, cold, and wet. It could be hours before anyone came down to rescue him. He wanted the money, all right. He had pictured all the stuff he would buy. In his mind, he was already rich. But what good would it do him if he was dead? Wait, Clay screamed in a high voice. I'm coming. In a second, Scott and Rico saw Clay's head sticking out. Then his shoulders got stuck, so Clay had to pull back and take off his coat. On the second try, Clay got both his head and shoulders through the opening. Then the two boys grabbed his arms and pulled the rest of his body through. Clay fell to the tunnel floor just as the large rock in the wall twisted free. From inside the mine there was a deep rumbling sound. Let's get out of here, Rico cried.